Welcome to the Contagious Code Podcast, where we dive deep into code, learn practical skills, celebrate the beauty of engineering, and eliminate imposter syndrome. I'm Tejas Kumar, and I've been building software for over 20 years at places like Vercel, Spotify, Zeta, and more. Today, I'm an AI engineer at IBM. This is the new season of the Contagious Code Podcast, starting in 2026. And what better way to start it by talking about new year, new me, specifically selecting for health benefits and personal fitness goals. Before we get into it, this podcast is a labor of love and is frankly a side project compared to my full-time job. And the reason I do it is because I have benefited from an engineer's mindset my entire life, solving problems for myself as they come, including problems of health, fitness, career, and more. And I'd love to be able to share that with you to make the engineering-oriented thinking contagious. That's the name of the podcast, and also how you pronounce my name, Tejas. And so that's kind of the motivation here. But this is separate to my day job. And the way we can really make it sustainable is through partners and sponsors. So before we get into the meat, I'd love to take a moment and acknowledge the partners and sponsors of the Contagious Code podcast. Actually, there's just one. And if you'd like to partner or sponsor at any point, reach out. All the contact information is in the show notes below or at tej.as. The Contagious Code Podcast is partnered with Code Crafters. Code Crafters is a great way to level up your programming skills by learning two things at once. So with Code Crafters, how it works is you pick a piece of software like Docker or Redis or Git or something like that, and you pick a programming language like JavaScript or Python or whatever, and they teach you how to build the tool in the programming language. And so you learn both at the same time. They have a generous free tier, but should you start paying, you can get a massive discount if you go to tej.as/codecrafters. Again, those links are in the show notes. Now, with that out of the way, welcome to the new season of the Contagious Podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you today about a topic that I believe is exceedingly important, and that is health. For a number of reasons. My own personal story, I've had a ton of struggles with health. I grew up mostly in hospitals, very close to death. That's a story for another time. Let me know if you're interested on social media, and we'll maybe do an episode on that. But the podcast isn't really about me personally. It's about actionable solutions to daily problems that we all face through the lens of engineering. And so let's just stick to the facts. And the facts are this. For most of us, maybe everybody listening, we spend a lot of time sitting, and health and fitness and vigor often takes the back seat. And sometimes, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I don't go to the gym as much as I should. I'm disappointed with how much I run. Even like advanced athletes will say, oh, I don't do this enough or that enough. And there's a ton of things we know we should be doing, but we don't do for one reason or the other, right? Maybe we just had children or we have a demanding job, whatsoever. My entire life, I've lived and functioned as an engineer. And by engineer, I just mean somebody who solves problems. I wrote my first website when I was 8 years old. I have a diploma in C++, which is a programming language, that I got at the age of 10. It has a date on it and my name on it, right? And so something that I've enjoyed is recognizing problems, as in I don't do this enough, and then coming up with a solution to them, or problem solving, which I believe is really at the core of engineering. So how can we then engineer better health, if not ideal health, in 2026? That's what we're going to be looking at today. And it's interesting because for software developers and engineers, who are typically a lot of the listeners of this podcast, it's especially ironic, right, that we build technology that changes the world, but we do it while sitting in chairs and staring at screens and disrupting our own biology. And there's almost like a poetic, sacrificial element to it here. But what if we could do that without the cost? What if we could build software or contribute to society without also harming ourselves, even if we just sit so much? Because here's an interesting statistic. There was a meta-analysis. We'll actually look deeper in this in today's episode. But there was a study on over 1 million people that found that if you sit more than 10 hours a day, it increased your risk of death by 48%. Right? You're twice almost as more likely to die from stuff if you just sit more than 10 hours a day. That's absolutely alarming. And so today in the episode, we're going to cover a ton of actionable things that we can consider to engineer ourselves into better health. And this is not just for software engineers. I'm not going to tell you like write this algorithm and then you'll have better health, but we'll think in a systematic way and decompose the problem into smaller ones so that we can work our way towards better health outcomes. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. This is the roadmap for our time together today. We're going to start by talking about the foundation of all health. Can you guess what it is? Um, it's sleep. Sleep is, I can't even, and this is something we all know. I think we all know how important sleep is. Sleep is just absolutely essential. And if we're not sleeping right, we might as well forget about the other things because that's where it starts and that's where it ends, and that is so key. I'll editorialize a little bit, but we'll get deeper into it. People who have disrupted sleep almost always will lead to major depression, burnout, and a ton of other mental health disorders. It's like the strongest link for all kinds of issues. And so sleep, we'll actually spend the most amount of time talking about sleep. We'll then switch to nutrition, aka food, exercise, social connection, work-life balance, and all of this is like chaptered in YouTube. And then we'll talk about stress management, recovery, and finally we'll talk about travel and jet lag and things like that. Everything is not my opinion. This is really important. I have spent a lot of time on mostly PubMed, which you may see open on my screen here if you're watching. And PubMed has more than 39 million citations for all kinds of biological research and things. And so a lot of this is rooted in science. And it's rooted in science for the reason being that engineering really is science applied to problem solving. That's really all that you take science, you apply it, you have applied science, and then you apply science to problem solving, and then you have engineering. Okay, and so we want to engineer our way to better health this year, and we're going to do it by applying science with the intent of problem solving, aka engineering. And for that, of course, we need science. So that's kind of the plan today. Everything should be timestamped on your platforms if you want to skip ahead or so on. But this is kind of the flow. By the end of this episode, you'll understand not just what works, but also why. Why does this work? And what have I been getting wrong most of my life? Before we begin with the meat of that and sleep, I'd love to just talk to you about where I'm coming from. Briefly, I as of this day of recording this, I can say that I'm healthier than I've ever been. I have since run not a full marathon, not an ultra. That's kind of the goal, but I do regular half marathons. I lift a good amount of weight. I can do pull-ups. I can do push. I can support my own body weight in a variety of configurations, and I tend to be good. I think probably the best thing that I'm the most proud of is I can travel across any time zone from Japan to California. And just have no jet lag at all, zero disruptions to my sleep and my life, because I can just learn and adapt very quickly. And I think the goal of most things we'll discuss today really is just the ability to be flexible, the ability to not be in cold weather and say, oh my gosh, I'm freezing, I'm so uncomfortable. And similarly, the ability to be in hot weather and be like, oh my gosh, I'm sweating, I hate, but instead to be cool in both cold and hot weather. Right? To be flexible enough and adaptable enough to just be good in any environment that you're placed in, because that's the truth, right? We're often put in just a ton of adverse conditions sometimes. And I think those of us who struggle to adapt will have the hardest time. And so maybe at the heart of today's episode is just how can you be a person who is well adapted to a variety of environments, okay? And that's kind of what we're going for today. Indeed, that's been true of my own life. Just as I mentioned, I was born, I still to this day have a fatal, dangerous, life-threatening genetic condition that is not curable and is not healed. I am dependent on medicine that I have to take on a schedule every Monday, and if I don't take it, I will last maybe a couple weeks and then I'm dead, okay? And so this has led to a ton of complications. For example, I don't know, a lot of people don't know this, but I cannot extend my arms fully. Like I can't straighten them for a variety of reasons. But the reason I tell you this is because I know others in my condition who are restricted to a bed and who cannot have a normal quality of life because unfortunately they were not given the privilege to apply science in an engineering way to optimize their own health. So a lot of the things I'm telling you come from firsthand experience where I had to learn how do you run in a way that actually leads to a positive health outcome instead of running too fast and then getting injured and then you spend 2 weeks recovering or even months recovering, right? How do you recover well? How do you know when to take a break when you're getting sick? I had to like learn all of these things from first principles that I'm hoping to just share with you today in an effort to save you that trouble, frankly, through this episode. So it's really all about health and it's about solving your own health with an engineering mindset because I have had to, okay? And that's also why I'm somewhat familiar with this research because one, I just kind of know what to look for, but two, I also grew up in hospital. The first 18, actually the first, I'd say 23 years of my life were spent in hospitals. More or less. I spent more time at hospitals than I did at school. So much so the doctors were more teachers to me than my own teachers. And so I just also happened to be in that circle long enough to kind of speak the lingo and the jargon and understand what to look for. Okay. And so with that introduction, let's start by talking about why this matters for us. And this comes from a leadership principle from Simon Sinek, who's like a thought leader, coach type of guy. And he's like, start with why. And I think why is exceedingly important. And it's a really obvious question, right? Because we don't just want to live long. I unfortunately know some people who are in their 90s and maybe 80s, and they're not happy. They're wishing they were dead, for lack of a better way of saying it. And I want us to not just live long, but live well, such that we, me myself included, when I'm like 90 years old, I'm able to still run and do all the things I enjoy doing with a high, not just lifespan, but health span. I think Peter Attia is the person who says this, okay? And so what we're going to do is look at how we can really work towards these outcomes. Starting with sleep. Sleep is the absolute foundation, and this is the longest segment. So let's start by talking about why sleep architecture matters. And that's the first thing we're going to talk about, sleep architecture. What is that? A lot of you are software engineers or technical people, and you're familiar with the term architecture. So sleep architecture is the structure of your sleep. It's how it's organized into different stages throughout the night. Like, think of a building, right? A building has floors and rooms. Your sleep has different floors, different stages that serve different purposes. And this is, I promise, this is, we need to understand the first principles before we can understand how they work and how to tune them, how to engineer our way to better sleep. Probably the most commonly cited stage of sleep architecture is deep sleep, sometimes called slow wave sleep or SWS. It's the stage where restoration happens. Your brain during this sleep produces very slow electrical waves, and your body starts repairing itself. Literally, it's so cool. It's like when your phone is plugged into a charger, and you literally like your battery recharges because, okay, well, it's not quite the same, but you actually heal in this time. Your body repairs tissues, you build muscle, your immune system gets better. A lot of the things that I'm going to cite today are from papers that I will give you. There's links in the show notes and everything, but also probably the best book on the subject is called Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. He also summarizes a lot of these papers, and it's just a tremendous resource. So again, if you're a little bit more curious, I think Matt Walker also has a podcast. Links will be in the show notes. So deep sleep or slow wave sleep is where all the restoration happens, and it's also where your brain consolidates memories. So you learned a new framework. You're trying to build something with, I don't know, Hono. You're learning about RAG and agents. When you reach slow wave sleep, that's when those memories are committed, they're consolidated. And so if you go a night without slow wave sleep and you've spent a lot of time learning the day before, it's not like you're going to lose those memories, but how much you retain will obviously be diminished because it'll only be sort of committed the next time you reach slow wave sleep, which, your body has a really great way, actually, if you're sleep deprived, to force you, into SWS. So no need to panic there. You get most of your slow wave or deep sleep in the first half of the night. So you go to sleep, and very early, pretty much in the first half, you get the slow wave sleep. There's a thing also here, by the way, that precedes sleep altogether, which is sleep latency. Many of you are software engineers and you know what latency means. It's the same thing. It's how long does it take for you to fall asleep from the time your head hits the pillow. And there's a whole, we could spend an entire episode on that, and we'll try and sort of limit it here, but that's exceedingly also important because it informs the what happens once you fall asleep as well. So anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. There's slow wave or deep sleep where all the healing happens and then the memory consolidation happens. There's REM, rapid eye movement sleep, which is kind of one level above. So deep or slow wave sleep is like the lowest possible state, and REM is just slightly above that, where you're not actually like deeply sleeping. You're kind of shallow. You could call it shallow sleep. But this is the more mentally restorative stage. So if you've experienced like trauma and pain, if you've been wrestling with something at work, if somebody made you angry, and you're like, I hate this, REM is literally therapy while you sleep, right? It heals you, it restores you. Um, your eyes move around, if you've probably seen this with babies, and your brain is actually almost as active as when you're awake. This is also where you dream. And REM is where all the stuff that you face during the day, all the emotions, all the trauma, all the pain, is consolidated and processed. And also is where you tend to have ideas. Many of us, for example, have really great ideas. I get very innovative when I'm in this stage of sleep. There was, I forget who, and I'd have to Google this, but there was, I think it was Benjamin Franklin. There was like some American guy who would go to sleep in his rocking chair and he would hold balls in his hand. And I don't mean what you're thinking, I mean like metal balls. Because then when he passes kind of through REM, he would, like, his muscles would relax a little bit and the balls would fall on the floor and would wake him up, and he would be in this like liminal state. And that's where he would have his best ideas for problem solving. And that's very true. A lot of us have, if we pay attention, the epiphany comes either as we're about to sleep or as we're waking up in that sort of liminal state. So we said with deep sleep or slow wave sleep, you get most of it in the first half of the night. REM is the opposite. You get REM more towards the second half. Once your body has processed and consolidated memories and healed you in the first half, then you're whole enough in the second half to actually like dream, literally. And so you can only dream when you're like restored, if you get the deep sleep. It's not to say you can't get REM without deep, but deep comes first, and then REM comes in the second half of the night. Which is why if you don't sleep enough, for example, you have a tight schedule or something, and you don't get your full 7 to 9 hours of sleep, but you only get like 3 hours. What you're not missing out is deep sleep, because deep sleep happens early. What you're going to be missing out is REM sleep. So your body, and this is a beautiful design, right? Because your body like prioritizes healing and restoration. That's why deep is first. So it'll heal itself, and then once your deep is kind of over, the deep cycles, the REM can pick up. But REM is also important for kind of like health, mental health, growth and recovery, right? Emotional regulation, this and that. So if you get less REM, you're also more likely to be like irritable and just not a pleasant person. I forget where there was a study that showed people, and again, this is just one of the things that I don't have a citation for because I didn't prepare. This just comes from memory. There was a study where they showed people photographs of the faces of other people, and people who got less REM sleep perceived those faces as like scarier or more hostile than they actually were. And people who got enough REM sleep were not threatened by faces, so to speak, right? And so it really taps into our fear circuitry and threat detection if we don't get enough sleep. I think we already know this, but what we're going to talk about is how do we actually get enough sleep? Before we do that, we need to define just one more term, because there's a study that I'll reference that uses this, and that is polysomnography. Polysomnography is like the best way to measure sleep. It's not like your Apple Watch or your Oura Ring or your Whoop strap. But it's where researchers, they literally like attach like electrodes to your head, and to your face and to your chest, and they measure brain waves, the actual slow waves or slightly faster waves. They measure the electrical waves of your brain and eye movements and muscle activity and heart rate, all while you sleep. This is why it's also expensive. But if there was a consumer device, if 8 Sleep did this, I would buy that. I think it's really cool. Right? But all that to say, it's just the best way to measure sleep, okay? And so now that we're familiar with all of these, deep sleep and REM sleep and all of this, we can actually start to look at some really interesting findings that some science that helps us with engineering our perfect sleep. The first thing I want to cite to you is a study by Diekelman and Born. It's a 2010 paper, I think, where it's a review that synthesized I'm talking decades, a long time of sleep memory research. And what they did was they analyzed hundreds of studies, including the ones with like polysomnography. And what they found was that everybody had better memory task performance after a good night of sleep. And this is, I don't even need to give you this. I think we all just universally know this, right? You perform better on things when you sleep enough. They also discovered in the study during deep sleep, there are three specific types of brain waves that synchronize in a precise sequence. And this is too deep. We're not going to go into that. I recommend Matthew Walker's book, Sleep Spindles, and all of this. The thing that it showed was when you have slow wave or deep sleep, it replays memories from the day and it's so cool, man. It's like if you're a software engineer, you have things in your Redis cache that you at some point persist in your like Postgres and then later in your like Glacier store. If you're a software engineer, this will make sense, right? But there's an LRU cache, there's a short-term cache, and then there's like disk storage, and the brain works exactly the same way. And deep sleep is the scheduled maintenance window, so to speak, when all this memory consolidation happens. It is so incredible how most of what we build today is just copying the greatest design of all time, which is the human body and maybe the solar system. You know what I mean? That's deep sleep. With REM sleep, there was a study by Boyce and colleagues in 2016 where they studied mice, to be fair. So it's not really humans. And what they found with these mice is they silent specific light detection cells during REM sleep with light pulses, and they learned a fear conditioning task. And then what they did was they totally disrupted their REM sleep. This is the thing I was mentioning earlier, but the one I mentioned earlier was with humans. This one, they deliberately like removed REM sleep from some mice, and what they found was one, the mice, they just didn't remember that they had to be afraid of something. So they conditioned them to be afraid of something, disrupted their REM sleep, and then the mice were not afraid of the thing because they forgot, so to speak, this learned fear response. And that's really interesting how it can almost be like maladaptive, like you learn, hey, don't do that or stay away from that street, so to speak. If you don't get enough REM sleep, you just keep making the same mistake over and over again, right? And so it's so important for emotional memory consolidation and emotional health in general. Okay, so those are the stages, and so it's very, very important. The industry recommendation, I believe, is 90 minutes of REM and deep a night, and the rest of it in just what they would call just light sleep, so to speak. And of course, 7 to 9 hours per person is the gold standard. It varies. All of this is covered in Matthew Walker's book, but we need at least 90 minutes or so of deep and REM to be functionally healthy and not have these issues, to have our memories properly consolidated, to have our cells properly cleaned up, to have emotional states regulated. A lot of the times when people at work, for example, get upset and lash out and say all these things, my first instinct is, yeah, they probably didn't sleep. Because I've experienced that in 2022. I was a really toxic employee, teammate. I was working at Zeta, I can remember, and there was so much travel between San Francisco and Germany, and I was not a pleasant person. Ask anyone who worked with me at Zeta, right? They'll be like, yeah, when it was travel season, he was not pleasant. And reflecting on that, it's because the REM sleep was not there. And this is the whole point of this episode. We can connect the dots as engineers with science and engineering and understand and then problem solve. So if you're finding yourself agitated or emotionally somewhat unstable, then the antidote is to prioritize REM sleep. If you're finding yourself physically not recovered from exercise, or you're having a hard time remembering things, you forget your keys, you don't know where your phone is, it's a good chance you're not getting enough slow wave or deep sleep. And that's what you need to fix, okay? And so we're identifying problems. We learn how to fix them also. In fact, the most potent way to fix any sleep problem is, I'm gonna let you guess, is light. Light is the main driver of our circadian, that is roughly 1 day, rhythm. Light is so extremely important, but not just light in isolation, also the absence of light, aka darkness. Like balancing light and dark is absolutely essential to getting sleep correct. It is the most important thing. There's nothing more important than light to regulate your sleep. And it's true for all mammals, not just us. And so it sounds kind of basic, but you want a lot of light when you're supposed to be awake and a lot of dark when you're supposed to be asleep. Um, that's essentially it. There's a lot more to say about this. For example, when you wake up in the morning, you go outside. There's a lot of light out there. If it's sunny outside, 10,000 plus lux, which is a unit of light, and this level of light triggers your body to produce cortisol. That is a hormone of stress. It makes you feel stressed. And a lot of people say, hey, cortisol is bad. I need lower cortisol. It's actually awesome. You want to wake up and you want that stress because that stress is what motivates you to then go out and like do stuff in the day. If you didn't have that cortisol spike, you just like lay in bed all day and kind of laze. In fact, it is currently winter where I live in Germany and we don't have the sun and we don't have bright light. And frankly, I wake up and I don't feel like doing anything because I don't get the cortisol spike unless I spend time with a massively bright light in my face. And that's something I do for health because I care about sleep quality. And if you're living in a solar challenged area like me, that's something that's a quick way to fix your sleep is to when you wake up, just blast yourself with light. If you think it's too bright, it's probably not, right? You want to go really hard, 10,000 lux. But there's actually an app for the iPhone called Light Meter, I think, which will show you. You point your camera at it and it'll tell you how much lux it is. I always go for 10,000 plus. And of course, it's also a function of distance. You know what I mean? Like the sun, like 1 inch from your face is going to be way brighter than the sun, where it is, right? And so if you have some type of portable light, you want to put it like really close to your face if it's dim. And of course, you don't want to look directly into this because you'll go blind. Please just think. But light is so important. And so, okay, here's what we want. We want light early in the morning or when we wake up so that we get stressed and we get motivated. This also primes us for relaxing later because ideally you don't have the cortisol the entire day, right? It diminishes. And when it lowers naturally, that's when you're kind of like relaxed enough to fall asleep. So that morning light is so important. And it's not just me, Matthew Walker, Andrew Huberman, other people, the papers, PubMed, like everybody, like this is the most important thing. Light is the thing, light and darkness. And so what helps me exceedingly well is light as soon as I wake up. And then sometime around sunset, provided I'm not living in a place where the sun sets at like 11 at night, right? Around, I'd say 4 hours or so before I intend to go to bed, I just dim all the lights. Dim all the lights, go super low. But not just that, I have blue blocking glasses. And I don't mean like the regular consumer ones. I mean very, like all I see is red. These glasses, it's from a company called Lichtblock, the German company. I'm not affiliated, but amazing company. It blocks out literally every wavelength of light other than red. So I see it's monochrome. I see just red, and all the blues become black, all the greens become black. So it's like I'm living in a filter. But hey, I sleep exceedingly well. And the other reason for this is red light or slow wavelength light, like red, lowers your heart rate. Did you know this? Like, so the blue light and the sort of thing that spikes your cortisol in the morning raises your heart rate naturally, right? That's what stress is. But I think it was Brian Johnson who said, if he could boil all of health and well-being down to one number, this number would be your resting heart rate, especially before bed, right? And the lower that number, the better everything in your life is. And the best way to lower that number is darkness and blue blockers and deep breathing. We'll get to that at night, right? And so I can't emphasize enough, if you're struggling with sleep, number one thing, light and regular light. I don't have children yet at the time of recording anyway, but if I do, this is also something I'm going to try with a newborn, right? From day one, lightness and darkness is very controlled and taken care of, because I think a lot of sleep disorders genuinely come from this. Okay, so light, the sun is actually called in the medical literature, PubMed, the sun is called the Zeitgeber, which is the German word for time giver. It is like the anchor. It decides when you feel sleepy, when you feel alert, when your body temperature rises and falls, when hormones are released. All of this comes from the sun. It's no surprise why people used to worship the sun. In fact, if you go read the Wikipedia page about the sun, it's such a flamboyant, it almost looks like the sun wrote it, because it is that serious. So we have the light in the morning that helps, and when it becomes dark, when you wear your blue blockers, when it's evening time, that darkness primes your brain and body to produce melatonin, which is another hormone that is the response to the environment darkening. And the morning light exposure is directly tied to the evening melatonin exposure. So it really, like, that morning light sets everything in motion that should be in motion. And then in the evening, if you dim the lights and you get your blue blockers on, your body will naturally produce melatonin. Melatonin is magic. Some of you take this as a supplement. I do not think it's a good idea, because it's a hormone. It's wild that you can just buy hormone. Why can't you buy testosterone in a pharmacy? Anyway, different topic. But melatonin, your body will produce this with the right darkness and so on, and it's really effective for creating the onset of sleep. Melatonin doesn't keep you asleep, but it makes you fall asleep. It reduces your sleep latency. Blue light, especially bright blue light, lowers it. It significantly suppresses your melatonin. Now, a lot of the listeners of this podcast are software engineers, right? And look at me. I'm surrounded here. If you're watching on video, I'm surrounded by blue light. There's a big monitor and there's all kinds of things. We spend time around blue light. I'm not surprised many of us struggle with sleep. Okay, you might be thinking, oh, but I use dark mode. Nobody cares. There's still blue light waves reaching your retina, your eyes. The blue light is high frequency. It's fast light. This is also why your veins look blue through your skin when they're actually red, because blue light just travels so much faster than red light, and that's what comes to your eye first. This is also why the sky is blue. This is why we see things the way we do, because blue just travels really fast. Anyway, that blue light is very excitatory. And so the best thing you can do if you find yourself around screens at night and you cannot avoid it is put red light filters on them, and doubly put red light filters on your eyes by way of blue blocking glasses. This will make a difference, believe me. Okay. That, I will tell you off the bat, is just going to fix a whole slew of problems. Hey, look, we're doing engineering. We're engineering our way to better health. This is the way. There's the social factor. Are you going to be that weird person who has the special glasses? Let me tell you, I am the weird person. I do that. Like when I watch stuff at night in bed, I'm wearing these blockers. And guess what? It takes me 8 minutes to fall asleep. I get 2 hours and 15 minutes of REM sleep every night. And I get about an hour 45 of deep. And I feel awesome. I heal from disease like in a day. I don't get jet lag anyway. So there's a benefit to being the weird person, because unfortunately the way of the world is so bad that people need episodes like this. You know what I mean? My hope is you wouldn't even need this episode, but if you do, give us a shout out on social media. You know what I'm saying? Because if you need it, there's a chance that other people need it. Okay. Let's continue. Melanopsin. What's that? It's a protein that is found in about 1 to 2% of your eye. And these they don't help you see actually anything, but they measure the intensity of light, and they tell your brain like what time of day it is. So the melanopsin cells are what disrupt your melatonin release and what either tell you to be awake or asleep. And so you want to make sure like no blue light definitely, but also no light lands on them during the nighttime. And the cool thing is also they're like optimized. This is just a little factoid. They're optimized for things directly overhead, like the sun. So if you have like blue light coming from above you at nighttime, you're just going to have a bad time, and nobody wants that. Okay. And so that's how you sleep very well. Let's talk about my sleep routine. Um, I wake up thinking about sleep, and I go to bed thinking about sleep. I tend to be a little bit neurotic about sleep, just because it is absolutely, without a doubt, the most important process we all go through. Okay, and so what do I do? Well, as soon as I wake up, my main thing that I think about is, okay, I need to um, get that blue light into my eye to get me stressed. So I will wake up and I'll go outside, and even if it's not sunny, there's still a ton of light outside behind the clouds, you know. So I'll wake up. I happen to have a balcony that I'm very thankful for, and I'll wake up and I'll go outside. And I'll go outside and I'll get as much light as I can. I'll make a cup of coffee, and then I will stand outside drinking the coffee. So I get this two for one. I get light, but I also get caffeine, which that's probably another discussion. We will have discussion, but caffeine also wakes me up, right? And so I get light coffee, and then coffee does just the right amount of work to stain my teeth. So then I'll go brush my teeth after that, and do all the bathroom stuff, um, and then go about my day. Sometimes I will have food in the daytime. I typically don't have breakfast. Again, meal timing is something we'll talk about, but that's kind of the morning stuff. And then I live the day, and about 2 hours before bed, actually, not 2 hours before bed, I'd say 4 to 6 hours before bed, I'll have my last meal. We'll talk about meal timing. And 2 hours before bed is when the blue blockers come on and everything is as dim as possible. Um, and within those 2 hours, that's usually when the yawning will start. You know, I'll start yawning, and we'll be watching something, and with enough time, I'm just gonna fall asleep very quickly. Um, I then This is actually an interesting thing as well. I know I wear an Aura ring, which is like the best consumer grade sleep tracker. Again, I have no affiliation to them. I just know that it's the best. Through There's a YouTube channel called Quantified Scientist. He's a person who just objectively tests everything. It's a great channel. So he has also found that Aura is just superior for for sleep tracking. Anyway, Aura has told me that I have my sleep efficiency is 85%. Okay, but what is sleep efficiency? It's literally the ratio of how much time you spend in bed versus how much time you spend asleep. How much time you spend in bed versus how much time you spend asleep. And these are not the same things. Some people, unfortunately, will lie in bed for like 12 hours, but only sleep for 4, right? And that's really poor sleep efficiency. Your sleep efficiency is 100% if you spend 100% of your time in bed asleep, right? Nobody has that. But mine is in the 90th percentile. It's like 92%. It was not always this way. It was 85% when I started caring about sleep. And so thankfully, a lot of good has happened. Why am I telling you this? Well, you need to find out your sleep efficiency, because this will help you get the right amount of sleep. I'll give you an example. My sleep efficiency, let's say, was 85%. So if I'm in bed, if I'm targeting 8 hours of sleep, then how long do I need to be in bed to get those 8 hours? This is where the sleep efficiency comes in. If I know that I only sleep 85% of the time I'm in bed, then what I'm going to do is take the target of sleep, that is 8 hours, and divide it by 0.85, right? Because that's 85%. So you take 8, you divide by 0.85, you get back a number. I don't know what that number is. I can actually, let's see if I can use my calculator here. Actually, I can't. I don't know where it is. Here we go. Okay, I'm just going to pull up my calculator. So what did I say? 8 hours divided by 0.85. That is 9.4. So roughly 9.5, 9.5. So I need to be in bed for 9.5 hours if I want to sleep 8 hours, right? You just do that quick math, and then I'm going to actually get 8 hours of sleep, of which some will be REM, some will be deep, and I'll be restored. So I do that, and I go to bed at the right time, sleep, and then wake up also at the right time. That's kind of how it works. I don't take melatonin because my body produces it, and I'm very sensitive to protect my body's natural production of melatonin, and that works quite well. We'll talk a little bit more about the details of meal timing here in just a little bit, but there's also some supplements that help with the sleep stages, like REM and deep, that we'll also get into shortly. Okay, so that's my routine. There's a little bit more to it because I kind of skipped through the day. So I also use temperature to my advantage. So this is also another thing that will help you with sleep latency. I happen to be privileged enough to live in a home with a sauna in it, but if not, a hot shower will be just fine. What you want to do is raise your temperature about 2 hours or so before bed. And by raise your temperature, I mean like, sauna or a shower, like a really hot shower or something like this, because your core body temperature is the second sort of biggest driver to sleep. So the first biggest driver, as we said earlier, is light. Second biggest is temperature. Your temperature just naturally rises and falls, and it's at its lowest 2 or 3 hours before you naturally wake up. This is not with an alarm. This is naturally. It's really awesome how it is. So it follows a very predictable circadian rhythm. It rises during the day. In the late afternoon, it's at its peak, and then slowly it drips, right? And when the temperature drips or lowers, that's usually when you start to get sleepy. And then melatonin also kind of works in that way. It's really awesome. So how can you, in a way, trigger this? How can you trigger the cooling? Well, you trigger the cooling by getting warm. when you get warm, your body's like, oh, I'm so warm, I need to cool down, and then it does that, and then it lowers the temperature. Your brain does, and then when you lower your temperature, your body's like, oh, I feel sleepy now. If you maybe can't do a full shower or something, the best way to cool down is to just really warm your extremities. It's called distal vasodilation. You heat up your hands and your feet, and what happens there is blood comes to the surface of your hands and your feet, and it brings, your body will bring warm blood to the surface, and that will take the heat to the surface of your body and away from your core, your center, and then you cool down, right? And so that's also something I do. I'll do sauna or a hot shower 2 hours before bed. Really helps the sleep latency. And there's a lot of papers about this as well that I put in the show notes. But yeah, you could even do a bath, right? Some people will do bed socks as well, just to kind of get that blood there. Okay, so what is our wind down routine? Well, there's some sauna, but before the sauna, there's also just food. How does food play into this? Food is stress, right? Like you eat a big meal, and what happens is your heart rate goes up. That's literally what happens. Your heart rate goes up because your body needs to then produce a lot of things to break down those nutrients and extract them and so on, right? And so you want to not keep your body busy. Like eating before bed, or even, heaven forbid, even a midnight snack is like one of the worst things that you can do. I cannot recommend midnight snacks. I think it's just really wrong. In fact, I was walking by a shopping mall the other day, and I saw this shirt. It said late dinner, and I was like, what? That's like false teaching. That's heresy. And so I bought it, and then we embroidered underneath late dinner the word never. Late dinner, never, because it's not a good idea. So food, you want to keep the stress that comes from processing food away from bedtime. This is where something like time restricted feeding, TRF, or intermittent fasting comes into question. We'll talk about food in the next section, because food comes after sleep. But you want to eat your last meal sort of 4 or 6 hours, if you can, before bed. And you want to make sure it's not a very complex meal. You know what I mean? Like if you have like a lot of fat and a lot of protein, a lot of fiber, a lot of things to break down in this meal, then you're just going to make your body work hard. And this work might extend into your sleeping time, right? So in some cultures, what they do is, breakfast for kings and dinner for paupers, they would say. And there's a reason for that, right? Like Abendbrot is a thing where I live in Germany, where dinner is literally just bread and butter. Sometimes it's just soup, right? Because you want to ease that processing. That's actually a thing. So let's consider sleep so far. If we're struggling with sleep and if we want to make it better, what can we do? Number one, light regulation. Right? Light is the most important thing. Okay? We do not, so bright blue light in the daytime, low, if any, red light in the nighttime. This is already going to solve a bunch of things. There was another paper that showed that sunset viewing helps you even more, because looking at the right amount of orange / blue light in the evening at a sunset primes us for sleeping as well. So that's so important. Sunset, maybe sunrise viewing as well. It's good for the day. I don't know, but light regulation in general. Number one. Number two, temperature regulation. You want to ideally you want to be cold in the daytime. There was this great study by in Denmark where they tested cold exposure and it set a long tail of good feeling throughout the day for people. So cold in the morning, warm 2-3 hours before bed, and then you're going to have a good time. So light, number one, temperature, number two, food, number three, with no big caveat other than you want your last meal to kind of be a simple one. And this is going to get you very, very far. Just these three things. Your sleep is going to get so much better. But once you're sleeping, once you're producing the melatonin, your sleep latency is low, you're sleeping well. What happens in sleep, right? So I know people who will not get enough deep sleep. They just won't. Or they won't get enough REM. A lot of people don't dream. How do you fix this? Thankfully, there's science, and this is actually really good science. So I want to walk through I'd say two supplements that I take that significantly help me specifically target deep sleep or slow wave sleep. And once deep sleep is kind of accounted for, REM just comes as a natural successor. It's actually really awesome. The two supplements I'm talking about specifically are magnesium and glycine. Magnesium and glycine. These two, I take them and they are so effective. So let's talk about them with science. There's a study by Abbasi and colleagues in 2012 in the Journal of Research in Medical Sciences. The best thing about this study is it's a double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized control trial. It's awesome. Nobody knew who was taking what. Everything was random, and some people were just given a placebo. So if magnesium made a difference, it's extremely clear. This is like the best kind. So 46 old people with insomnia were randomly assigned to either 500 milligrams, so half a gram, of magnesium or a placebo daily, and this lasted about 8 weeks. They were given like sleep questionnaires. They did also some blood tests for melatonin and cortisol, and so what they found was the number of overall sleep time significantly increased in the group that took magnesium. The sleep latency, the time to fall asleep, with a p of 0.002, significantly decreased. Everybody fell asleep way faster. And the best part, because of that, sleep efficiency was high. Remember we talked about my sleep efficiency, 85%? Magnesium through the roof helped everybody. Very, very significant increase. In terms of early morning awakening, that is like before you want to, that was also decreased. The amount of cortisol, so the stress in their blood, decreased also by 28%, which is interesting because the placebo group actually had a slight increase in cortisol. They were somehow more stressed, and which makes magnesium even more compelling here. And finally, the amount of melatonin in their blood around sleep time was also significantly increased. Absolutely proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that 300 to 500 milligrams of magnesium about an hour before bed is going to win. You are just going to get so much better sleep if you do this, if you struggle with sleep already. There's many different kinds of magnesium. And in this study, they used magnesium glycinate. Magnesium citrate also works. It doesn't really matter. It's just glycinate helps the magnesium bond a little bit better. But honestly, this is nitpicking and anything's going to be fine. Just magnesium oxide, from what I've read preparing this episode, isn't really well absorbed. Magnesium oxide also maybe makes you go to the bathroom and gives you some gastric distress. So magnesium oxide not, but really anything else is fine. There's another interesting statistic just while we're on magnesium. Half of adults in the United States don't get enough magnesium from your diet. Like half. And there's a good chance you're maybe in that half. So too much magnesium, you just pee it out. Too little magnesium, you don't sleep well. Right. So maybe if you're struggling with sleep, that's kind of something to try. And what I use for deep sleep specifically is glycine, based on a study by Kawai and colleagues in 2015, where they combined a human trial with mouse experiments to understand how glycine works and if it actually helps. And what they discovered, indeed, was that glycine helps a lot. It activates NMDA receptor. Look, I'm not going to talk biology here, but I'll just share with you the results, and the links to all of this is in the show notes. Non-REM sleep latency went from, listen to this, when they supplemented with glycine, went from 55 minutes to 37 minutes. Sleep latency went from an hour to effectively half an hour. It's absolutely bananas. They also measured the core temperature. It all dropped better with glycine, and people were not groggy the next day with glycine, right? So they wanted to know how exactly glycine helps sleep, not just that it works. And so they gave it to people and watched what happened. And what they found was the body temperature dropped about half a degree Fahrenheit. And they tested mice. And these mice, they're called knockout mice. And I just have to tell you this because it's so wild. These mice, they had their internal clock. It's called SCM. They had their clock just removed surgically, and glycine did nothing, right? And so what this tells us is that glycine activates your circadian clock to adjust your temperature so that you can sleep. It's not a sedative, but it literally works on the thing that sets time in your mind to prepare you for sleep. So the protocol from this paper did 3 grams. I do 3 grams. I do 3 grams of glycine 45 minutes before bed. I do that. And it just, man, my deep sleep at night, because probably if the temperature drop is good, hour 45 minimum, sometimes 2 hours 15 was, I think, my personal best. And so those two I will do religiously. There's other things like ashwagandha, theanine, etc. We won't talk about that. Sunil Pai, if you're listening, Sunil Pai, I don't know if you know this guy, but he's a theanine peddler. They're cool, I guess. I don't really do them very much. I have used them when I train intensely. Theanine will relax me, but I think that's outside of the scope of this episode, frankly. Let me know if you want to talk about theanine, and we'll do that. I think it's just kind of not so interesting. Okay, so that's sleep and food timing, and all of this is how we reason about these things. And again, I hope from now we're able, new year, new me, to just absolutely crush our sleep, because again, it is the foundation of all health. Did you know Kitze? I don't know if you know Kitze. He's a developer. Christian, he'll probably be a guest on the podcast. He sent me a paper literally today, where he saw for the first time how also we choose worse foods. Like our so-called willpower is worse when we don't sleep. And so if you don't sleep well, you're going to choose worse foods. You're going to eat a bunch of garbage. You're going to flip out on people. Emotionally, you're not going to be regulated. And you're going to be like, exercise is the worst. I hate exercise. I just want to lay in bed all day. And so look at that, right? Because you haven't slept well, you have not exercised, you have not ate well, you have not you've not had the right social connection. Every pillar of health depends on sleep, right? And look, we've spent almost an hour talking about this with good reason, because it is that important. Okay. Number 2, this long form podcast. Number 2, food, diet is another one that's really important. The great thing about this is there's not one diet for everyone. It's so cool. I have had and do have a variety of diets over the course of my life, depending on the season and depending on my goal. If you want to lose fat, you're going to eat differently. If you want to be the fastest runner, the best athlete, you're going to eat differently. If you want to gain muscle, you're going to eat differently, right? And so I will lay out the levers we can pull, the levers that I pull, and we as engineers will choose the right one to solve the problem. Okay, contagious engineering. Let's go. So it starts with, what do you actually want? What is healthy for you? For somebody who's like my height, like 173 centimeters, 5'9", but who's like 50 kilograms, you probably don't want to lose fat. You probably shouldn't lose weight, right? So healthy for you is going to be different than somebody who's also my height and like 300 pounds, right? And most of it is fat. So you're going to really, health depends on which direction you want to go. Let's say let's explore all scenarios. Let's start with the most likely one and go to the least likely one. Most likely one is you're overweight, or you see yourself as overweight. Man, like body dysphoria is wild. I look at myself in the mirror and I'm fit for a person my age with my, conditions. But I always feel like I have to lose weight. And so let's talk about losing weight, because most people, New Year's, you want to lose weight. Losing weight in and of itself is unhealthy. It's unhealthy because weight is not just a number, but it's the composition of everything on your body. And so if your goal is a specific weight, that's less healthy than a specific body composition. What is body composition? It's the percentage breakdown of your body between bone and fat-free mass, that's like muscle and skin, and fat mass. That's exactly what it sounds like, fat, right? And so it's fat versus fat-free mass versus bone density, and you want that to be ideal, instead of just weight, because you could be an ideal weight. You could be, I don't know, like I'm 75 kilograms at 173 centimeters. You could, some would say that's ideal, but what if I'm like 70%, what if I'm 30, 40, 50% body fat? What if most of my body is fat, and that fat is not just under my skin but in my organs? What if I have a fatty liver, right? But my weight is fine, body composition matters way more than weight. Okay. And so I would love if we could move towards that direction, thinking about, not I want to lose weight, but I want to lose fat. Not that I want to gain weight, but I want to gain muscle, right? Okay. So let's say then we specifically want to lose fat. How do we do that? It's a combination of diet and exercise. I love this episode because it's not like I'm telling us anything new. But what you want is ultimately to be in a caloric deficit. You want to eat less than you need to survive. And of course, you can widen that deficit with exercise. You can burn more energy than you eat by doing exercise. But then the question becomes, okay, what kind of exercise? And the answer is very interesting, because this is where a lot of people mess up. My friend JB wanted to lose fat, and so he decided, I'm going to go running, like many of you will decide. Within a couple of weeks, he was like struggling to live his life. He was like in pain, and he was not doing well, and he was like stressed, and there was also mental health effects, and he was depressed, and he took everything personally, and it was negative. And I was like, what's going on, dude? Shows me his phone. The guy has been running at like, his heart rate was 100 and sometimes 202 beats per minute, which is very unhealthy. And so what his mistake was, he ran very fast a lot. And that's not what gets you fat loss. Fat is a very slow source of energy. Your body does not want to burn fat because it's expensive to burn fat. It takes a lot of effort, and your body is optimized to make you survive. Fat, you store fat for seasons where there's famine and you can't get food. It's like the last resort. We're about to starve. Let's burn this, right? And so if you run really fast and you like almost kill yourself from strenuous exercise, your body's not going to burn fat, unless it's going to burn mostly creatine, which is a source of energy in your body, and glucose, aka carbohydrate, which is also stored in your muscles as glycogen. And in your blood is glucose. And so it's going to burn those. And so if you want to specifically lose fat, how do you do that? There's great research by Dr. Andy Galpin, who also has a podcast, and we'll put that in the show notes. But how you lose fat is by long bouts of easy exercise. But it's still somewhat challenging. So let's say you're 20 years old, right? You've got to calculate roughly your maximum heart rate. That's safe for training. And the easiest way to do this, that's kind of rough and not very accurate, but accurate enough, is 220 minus your age. So if you're 20 years old, that means your max heart rate is somewhere around 200 beats per minute. And this is where you can decide, okay, what is intense exercise? What is not intense exercise? Intense exercise, obviously, is 100% of 200 beats per minute, or even more than that, 205, 206, right? Middle intensity is 50% of that, which is 100 beats per minute. And what you want to do to lose fat is 65 to 75% of that, which is like, 140, something around that, 150, 160, something there. 65 to 75% of your max. find that heart rate, use a heart rate sensor, use an Apple Watch, use a polar strap, use a whatever you want, and do literally move in any way, go on a bike, walk uphill, run, I don't care. But if you sustain that heart rate, 65 to 75% of your max, if you sustain that for a minimum of 45 minutes per session, and then have a couple sessions a week, you're going to lose fat. It's literally that simple. Provided also you have a caloric deficit, right? If you do that and then just eat like 5 cakes a day, I'm sorry, you're not going to lose fat, right? So that's the exercise portion. To lose fat with exercise, that's what you want to do. Very simple, very easy. Get your heart rate to 65 to 75% of your max and just live there. And you're going to be fine with exercise. You need to complement that with food. If you avoid carbohydrate, there's a better chance you will burn fat for energy. And the reason for that is glucose is your body's preferred source of energy. Literally, it loves that. It gives first priority to that. And you get glucose from carbohydrate. If you don't eat carbohydrate, your body's going to be like, oh, I don't have any of this. Okay, where else can I get energy? And then we'll go and use the fat for energy because it's the only energy. And a byproduct of fat metabolism or using fat for energy is called ketones. And ketones are tremendous. They're very healthy. This will put you in a state of also what's called ketosis, and you feel amazing. Your brain on ketones, I have been in ketosis, and man, ketones feel awesome. The only problem is that switch to go from glucose metabolism to ketone metabolism is a very painful switch. You'll get it. It's called keto flu. It doesn't feel nice, but when you're there, whoa, like the pounds melt off, and you also feel you just feel so good. It's really, I can recommend it, and that's the best way to lose fat. A very easy way to also have your caloric deficit to lose fat is using something called time restricted feeding or intermittent fasting, right? So if you restrict your eating only to within an 8-hour window, or I don't know, 5, 6, how many hour window, you're actually going to eat less just as a consequence of that. And so that's the goal. So what you want to do in terms of exercise is sort of middle moderate intensity, fairly often. Get your heart rate to 65, 75% of your max and live there. With food, eat within, I don't know, an 8 to 12 hour window, limited carbohydrate, you'll lose fat. There's nothing in there that would preserve fat. If you're somehow like holding on to fat still, there's a chance you're just still somehow getting carbohydrate. That would be my guess, and a lot of it. Maybe not so overt like rice, bread, pasta, potatoes, but maybe with fruit. A lot of people think fruits are not carbs, and so they'll do like, oh, I eat an apple. That's not carbs, right? No, it's look up carbohydrates, and that'll help you lose fat for sure. What if you, instead of losing fat, you want to tip your body composition the other way? That is, gain muscle. I don't know if I'm an authority on this because I don't have any muscle. No, but I have some very large friends, and I've had the privilege of talking to them. In fact, one of the guests in this series will be Isaac Akinchete, who is just an absolute beast, a professional soccer player and just a coach and just a machine. And so he would also tell you the same thing. He also studied sports science, and he's someone I consulted with. So subscribe for that episode if you're not yet subscribed. Anyway, if you want to gain muscle, how do you do that? Well, you need a caloric surplus, first of all. So maybe get rid of the time restricted feeding and eat more than you need. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, take this as license to just eat a lot of garbage. Oh, I'm going to have a pizza a day and then a big stack of pancakes. And that's not what it means. You're still going to want to eat somewhere close to your maintenance, just maybe a little bit more. And the interesting thing is you're still going to eat clean, right? A lot of it is just like rice and chicken, some type of lean protein. Carbs are the easiest thing for calories. And so you'll want, also since you're trying to gain weight, like carbs are good here. So you'll want to do rice, a lot of vegetables, and some protein. And I think the easiest meal here is rice, broccoli, and chicken breast, right? Like that's kind of standard. And so that in large quantities, plus then for exercise, not so much cardio, or this heart rate in the 165 to 175 kind of thing, or 65 to 75% kind of thing, but more resistance training. You're going to want to lift weights. That's the easiest way to get bigger, specifically in the 7 to 8 rep range. What does that mean? Pick a weight that's heavy enough that you can't do the movement more than like 8 to 10 times in a row. You physically can't. Like you fail, right? Um, that's it. Pick a muscle group, chest, back, legs, whatever. Pick a weight that you can move in a controlled way with good form, no more than 8 to 10 times, and do that for a few sets. How many sets of repetitions? Well, you'll want to do somewhere between 10 and 20 sets, hard sets per muscle group per week. I think that's pretty much the standard recommendation from all the literature that I read. 10 to 20 hard sets per week. And in each set, you do 8 to 10 reps where you cannot physically do another one. You don't have to take every rep to failure, but you want to do, up to 80%. And that's really, like, I think a lot of us overthink these things and try to over optimize as if we're some professional athlete who needs everything to be dialed in. For most of us, that's not the case. We stick to these basic principles. We eat, if we want to gain muscle, we eat more than we need, slightly more, mostly clean. We lift weights consistently in that way that I described, and we sleep. Remember, we talked about deep sleep and how that's the foundation. You grow during deep sleep, and that's really it. It's important also to emphasize that we recover well, right? You grow during recovery. You don't grow during stress. It's not even just grow. You adapt after the stimulus. You don't adapt inside the stimulus. Okay, so a lot of people think, oh, if I exercise a lot, then I'll adapt a lot, and that's not true. You need to allow time for recovery as well. Okay, but these are the levers for body composition change. And the interesting thing is, they all depend on sleep. There's a reason this episode is structured the way it is. If you're getting the right amount of slow wave sleep and REM sleep, then you'll naturally also just take joy in your bland garbage chicken breast and broccoli and rice, and you'll take joy in wanting to lift, and it will fall into place depending on your goal. I have been coaching a very prominent developer. Many of you know him, Kitze, Christian Ratakowski. I don't know his last name, and whatever. Anyway, and the guy, was over 100 kilograms and is now like 90. And so it's working. He's living the life he wants through our coaching. And it's literally that. It's literally like, hey, let's wake up and move. Let's go on a walking pad uphill, like medium heart rate, and then just eat clean. And I told him, I was like, just eat eggs, man. Eat eggs for breakfast until you're full, and then go about the rest of your day. That's really it, and guess what? He's living his best life. And so for body composition alteration, it's really just that. It's you want to eat right. The other thing is, while we're talking about sleep, is of course meal timing. You want to protect your sleep, right? And so that's really all I think is worth saying. Obviously, we know that alcohol is poison, right? And I was thinking about this earlier today. I don't drink any alcohol. I don't judge anyone for drinking alcohol, except maybe a little bit. But we live in a society where we actively poison ourselves, knowing it's poison, to feel good because everything's so bad. I don't mean to be a downer, but man, what a thought. Anyway, alcohol is bad. Don't do it. Smoking, vaping, dipping, snuff, like all the nicotine. Don't do that stuff. It's not going to help you with any of your. It's going to disrupt your sleep, first of all, which will then shipwreck the rest of your life. And nutrition. And I feel like I just have to say that, Okay, so we've talked about sleep. We've dialed in nutrition. Oh, and the other thing with nutrition is protein is absolutely essential. I think the recommendation is 1 gram per pound of lean body mass or targeted body mass. So if you want to be say, 65, 70, if you want to be 70 kilograms, that is 154 pounds, then you eat 154 pounds, 154 grams, of protein per day. That's it, yeah, I think that, and so how you even structure your meals is that much protein, and then depending on if you want fat loss, you get most of the rest from fat and a little bit of carb or fiber. And the other way around, if you want to gain muscle, mostly carbs, the static amount of protein, and then a little bit of fat, and then you're going to be good. So I think that's kind of the gist for nutrition. And this is all stuff we know. So I'm not even going to belabor this because we just know this. And it's more a question of sticking to it. But again, if we sleep right, we will stick to it because then we'll also see the results. Sleep, man, it's all about sleep. We'll have as a guest also a behavioral psychologist who will also help us answer the question, why do we have trouble? Why do we have trouble sticking to this stuff? And how can we get better at sticking to this stuff? So again, if you're not subscribed, subscribe for that. Okay. So we've talked about sleep. We've talked about nutrition. Let's talk about. We've also actually talked about exercise. Let's talk about things that are maybe less represented in health discussions, but so essential as a way of engineering our way to better health. Let's start by talking about social connection. The city that I live in, Berlin, as of a recent survey, they found 1 in 3 people self-describe as having 0 friends outside of people they work with. 1 in 3 have no friends other than work colleagues. That is absolutely, that's the saddest. That's one of the saddest things I've ever heard. Human beings are social creatures. Ask any evolutionary scientist, what they'll tell you is the Neanderthal race in human history was way more capable than us. They were bigger, they were faster, they were stronger, they were better in every way. They could use tools. I mean, they were like OG. Why then did we win? We won because we could collaborate better. We literally won because we're better together. Social connection is absolutely important. And there's no negotiating this. There's no saying I can do it alone because the truth is you can't. Religious people believe in a God. They would say God made you to be dependent on him or her or it and other people. There's just no doubt that a big part of health is social health. And so it's worth discussing here social health and how we can improve our social health, introverts, extroverts, ambiverts, all of that, with the goal of engineering. I want 2026 to be the best social year for us listening. Okay. I'd love to start this discussion by talking about my experience a little bit socially. And then we'll look at some research about how we can do better there. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, which seems like a year ago now, I am very, very sick. And because of my sickness, I never really went to school. My disease was such that 1 day of school would equal weeks in the hospital, and then weeks after that recovering, and then I go back to school for a day, and then I go back to the hospital. It was this big cycle, and so I never really. I tell you this because I never had like social activities very much. I might as well have been homeschooled. There came a time in the 10th grade where somehow, honestly, somehow I was invited to hang out with some friends from school, and this was my first like social interaction. We're sitting at a restaurant, and I was like, "Whoa, what is this? What's happening?" Um, and it was so strange because they were telling jokes, they were laughing, they were doing what kids do, and I was like, okay, but what do I do here? Like, what do I laugh at this joke? Like, what do I say? And I just didn't know. I didn't know how to be social, and so I was like, what? And so again, engineer mind. I went back home and I went on Google and I was like, how to be cool, how to connect with people, and I learned a ton. I mean, I read a bunch of books. I just went on this journey, and it has been so mean. I mean, I'm so social now. I just talk to a camera for like a couple hours. Um, what and my life, I'll say this, my life has never been the same. It has gotten better across the board from better social connection, and I want you to have that. To understand this in a little bit more detail, let's take a deeper look at loneliness through a study by Holt Lundstad and colleagues from 2010. It's a meta-analysis of social relationships and death and mortality. So what they did was they looked at 148 studies over a total number of 308,000 people. And what they found was that strong social relationships increased the odds of survival, that is living long, by 50%. By 50%. It's absolutely incredible. The effect size. So if you're lonely, what they found in this paper, if you're lonely, it's the same effect on your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And it's even worse than being obese and being physically sedentary. Absolutely banana. Social isolation is no joke. It's a real problem. And it's real. And so it's interesting too, because you can be socially isolated but also be in a room. Man, I have been in tech conferences where um, I'm around so many people and I'm super lonely. So social connection isn't just a numbers game. It's not a volume of people, but it's how do you actually connect? Do you feel like you were able to share yourself, and do you feel like that sharing was received and cared for, right? Very, very important. Um, it's also interesting that people say, "Oh, I am an introvert. I don't get energy from that." And it's there's research on this as well, where there's this like prediction error. We tend to think that social things are going to be worse than they are, um, but then we do the social thing and we go like, actually, this was kind of fun. Like actually, I enjoyed it. And it's interesting because I've heard this from both introverts and extroverts. Oh, I thought this was going to be way worse than it was, and then they did the thing and they came away feeling better. And the interesting thing is, one could posit that the main difference between extroverts and introverts is just the degree of this prediction error. Introverts think it's going to be way worse than it is to socialize, and extroverts think, yeah, it's going to suck. I don't want to do it, but it's fine, right? That's really the only difference, because both parties always come away from social interaction feeling better. And you may be shaking your head. You're like, oh, you don't know my mother-in-law. I always come away feeling drained. And I get that, but then we need to ask the question, why? Why do you feel drained? And it's interesting because a lot of the times we feel drained because we don't really express ourselves. We feel, at least for me, like I feel drained in social situations where it's just some blowhard talking about himself nonstop, and I just have to sit there and listen, and I'm furniture, right? I feel drained in that situation. I feel drained when um, I talk about myself, or I talk, but I'm talking to a sycophant like Claude, who says, "Hey, you're absolutely right," and they generate words like an LLM. You know, I know what draining interactions are, and I know what life-giving interactions are. But it's not that interactions themselves are inherently draining or life-giving. It's more the quality of them. And so, if we want high-quality social health, then we must optimize for high quality social interactions. One where we are seen, where we see the other person, where it's not sycophantic, where it's not like somebody just agrees with us, but it's also not some self absorbed narcissist only talking about them. It's an actual life giving exchange. And unfortunately, with Instagram and TikTok, maybe we just forgot how to do this. And thus many of us would just conclude, yeah, all social interaction sucks. I'm an introvert. But that's not true. I think we just may not know quality interactions. Okay, so the question then becomes, how do we fix this as engineers? And this is where the answer is kind of unfortunate, because with sleep, there's protocols, with nutrition, with exercise. There's all these protocols. With social health, it's not the same. It hasn't been studied as much, unfortunately. And so what we have is books like How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? We have hearsay, but in terms of like empirical science, it's rare. And so what can we do? Well, I can tell you my experience, because here's the truth. I crafted, this will sound maybe conceited, but I crafted a really great personality, and I can say confidently that I have the best relationships. I love everyone. My heart is always full. Let me just walk you through, for example, my week. I I go to church on Sunday, and it's not because like it's some religious only thing. Like I love the people. It's great people who are like trained in the art of listening, active listening, and loving and accepting you, right? On on Wednesday, I have a phone call with my friend Daniel, whom I've known for 15, almost 20 years. We basically grew up together. And Daniel and I meet and talk about life. He's got 3 children. We just catch up, and it's because I want to know him and he wants to know me. On Wednesday, we have people over, usually at our home, 6 to 8 people, and it's nothing. There's no magic, so to speak. It's just, hey, what's going on in your life? You're going to Egypt for vacation. Whoa, Tejas, how was Taiwan? And we share a meal, and there's just mutual interest, right? So I'm telling you this because I have this and I want you to have it. I've searched and searched for science to explain this, but I haven't. I've come up empty. And if you have papers, please let me know in the comments. But so this is going to be experiential and unfortunately anecdata, but I think there's merit here. Here's what helped me. I was in school rejected. I was rejected. Nobody wanted to be my friend. So as I mentioned, I had to go Google. When I Googled, here's what I found. I found that there are in this world billions of people, 8, 9, there's a lot of people. I read this book called Models by Mark Manson. I don't know if I recommend it. I was young and foolish. And it's at its core, it's a book about attracting women specifically. But it was nice because it wasn't sleazy. It wasn't like attracting women by being a pickup artist and a master manipulator. It was attracting women by just being honest. And I thought, okay, well, if we leave off the sleazy attracting women part and just think about the concepts in this book, there may be value. Turns out there was value because Mark Manson, I would love to have him as a guest on the podcast, by the way. Mark, what he says in this book is there are so many people in this world, so many. Some people will reject you and just be like, I don't like you. For whatever reason, you're too fat, you're too thin, you're too rich, you're too poor, whatever. People are judgment machines. But there's other people in this vast pool of billions who will just like you. Heck, they may even love you. They may even want to give their life for you, right? The option pool, there's billions of people, man. And so Mark's thesis in this book was, you just have to be yourself. You have to be yourself boldly. You have to be yourself unashamedly, unabashedly. You just have to hey, I really love Labubus. I'm into Labubus are the greatest thing since sliced bread. In fact, I hate sliced bread compared to Labu. You may be this, but I don't really care about Labubus. I'm just making a statement. You may be this person, right? You may be like, oh, I need Labubu. And guess what? Some people are going to be like, whoa, this person is in a cult. Some people are going to be like, that's weird. Other people are going to be like, yeah, I also love Labubus. You know what? I think you and I, we have common. Let's start a Labubu club. And before you know it, you've got these friends who appreciate you for you. And Mark's thesis is, you have to be yourself so much to the point where you're really just polarizing. You're just extremely polarizing. And the Labubu example, I think, is a great one because I don't really, if somebody was so into Labubus, I don't know that I would want to spend time with them that much. I don't, no disrespect, but that's just not my thing. And so it's polarizing. You know what I mean? Like someone obsessed with Labubus polarizes me away, but polarizes others toward them. And so Mark's thesis is, just learn yourself. Go out on dates with yourself. Love yourself. Find out what you enjoy, and then be that without apology, be that as best you can. And then watch people polarize, some away from you, but some towards you. And the ones who polarize towards you, provided it's not some terrorist cult echo chamber, but like healthy things, associate with them, love them. These are your people, But all of this starts with you learning what makes you you, and doubling down on that, and then finding people who accept and love that. If it's something harmful, like you love shooting people or something, that'll self-select very quickly. You'll go to jail. You know what I mean? So also society has a way of like shaping you as well here, and for me that has been super valuable. After reading Models, I was like 15 or something. I did that. I thought, okay, I'm this, and I am this, and this is what I'm going to be. And that's when I said, look, if you don't want me, that's fine. The world is very big. I'm just going to go over here and find other people. And that's when I found people like Daniel, right? Isaac, Max, Vika, Michael, Nathan. Like I found all my friends and David K. Piano and Kent Dodds and the people I know and love guests on this podcast, right? It's just because I said, hey, like no hard feelings. If you other people don't want me, I'll just be myself and the world will do what the world does. And so in the absence of science, that protocol, that engineering pathway is how I was able to engineer myself, frankly, by the grace of God, into just such life-giving social connection. Man, like I wish you could have a fraction of the love I share with all my friends and family. And I think that honestly, that'll also just make you live longer, right? There's a study by the American Heart Association. It's a scientific statement declaring that loneliness is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Literally, the American Heart Association says that if you are lonely, you have a 30% higher chance of heart attack or stroke or death. It's absolutely bananas. And I take models from me, find your own. Let me know in the comments what worked for you, because this is a real thing that we must not take lightly. And that we must, I think, look, there's a lot of literature on like food and exercise. That's why I also didn't spend much time on that, because you can do your own research. But social, I think there just isn't. And I'm hoping this episode can be that for you. If any of this spoke to you, please do not passively sit by and consume, but share it, okay? Because people need to know that. Fantastic. Let's move on to the next section, which is work-life balance, aka Severance. Anyone watch Severance? Severance is one of the greatest shows of all time. I really love watching Severance. If you like Severance, let me know in the comments, share it on social media, whatever. Work-life balance. This is another thing that unfortunately isn't well covered in the literature. We're gonna have to use anecdata here. If you know any papers, by the way, about work-life balance, share them with me, and I'd love to sort of trial them. In fact, I might, in preparing this episode, while it's happening, do a cursory search. But yeah, we'll see. In any case, I want to talk to you first with anecdata, and then we will talk about a little bit of detachment, but more like mediating work stress. The cool thing is there's plenty of literature around hobbies and the value that hobbies have, but not so much about like work-life balance and how do you take things maybe personally or not personally and so on and so forth. And so with that, let me start by saying I was extremely toxic. I was like the most toxic teammate on any team. I was really bad. In fact, I once worked this job at a company called G2I. Gabe, if you're listening, hi. We actually had, I think, Gabe. We had Michelle. We had people from G2I on the podcast for sure. Anyway, we had these people, and I was just not good. At one point, the majority of the engineering organization quit, and in their exit interview were like, yeah, we can't work with Tejas, he's just way too toxic. Believe me, I was bad. And in response to this, what Gabe, the CEO, and Lee, the CTO, my boss, what they did was, instead of firing me, they even said, they were like, hey Tejas, we want to fire you, but we think we can do better. And instead of firing me, they connected me with a coach, Mr. Michael Terrell. And what Michael Terrell did was just coach me, honestly. He did a lot of exercise. Some of that we'll share here, and it's clinical and it worked, so we'll share that. But besides that, I learned a ton, and I'm pleased to report I'm no longer toxic. Ask my manager, ask Carter at CRTR0 on social. Ask him, and he'll tell you. Anyway, so how can we deal with work-life balance well? How can we have healthy boundaries well? This is what I do, and it works very well for me. And also, there's an episode on the podcast with Michelle Bakels who talks about this. Specifically, she talks about two kinds of work, offensive work and defensive work. And she defines it like this. Offensive work is the work that you do that moves the needle on your specific tasks. So you have a goal. I need to fix this bug, whatever it may be. You go to work and you do that as your offensive work. Defensive work is work where other people consume your time. It could be a meeting about Q3 goals. It could be code review. It could be someone, has a calendar. Like, it's all the stuff where other people are in your space. So offensive work, I'm in my space doing damage to my goals. Defensive work, somebody's coming to do damage to my schedule, so to speak, right? And so these are the two kinds of work. What I found that works exceptionally well for me is I time box my offensive work, because frankly, I'm really only useful, not for the whole 8-hour day. In fact, with cognitive work, the more time you spend on a cognitive problem like writing code, the worse it gets over time. Code you write in hour 1 is going to be way better than code you write in hour 8. I think any of you who write code know what I'm talking about. Similar with anything, really. If you drive a car, you're a way better driver when you wake up and have coffee than when you're like drowsy at nighttime. We just get worse with time, usually, for cognitive, mentally demanding things. And so this is how I position my day, and how I tend to do work-life balance fairly well, by my own admission. I just feel healthy and not burnt out. What I do is I'll wake up, have coffee, and my morning is sacred. Actually, in my work calendar, I have big blocks for the morning that says, please ask before booking a meeting. And because I reserve the mornings. And so what I'll do is I'll start the day, and I will immediately, as soon as I start the work day, find out what I need to do today, like what offensive work I need to do, and take an hour and a half, 90 minutes, set a timer, completely disable all the notifications, make sure I've been to the bathroom, create an environment where there's just no interruptions at all. And for that 90 minutes uninterrupted, I am going hard. I'm in a tunnel of focus. Nobody can reach me. And in that 90 minutes, you should like things happen, man. Like I've seen mountains move, mountains of code. No, but I've seen so much happen, more than usual. And then after the 90 minutes, I'll take a quick breather, get some fresh air, reorient, and then check if I have another 90 minutes in me. If I don't, because those 90 minutes are extremely focused. If I don't, then the rest of the day is like lunch, and then defensive work. So a lot of like code review. Let's talk with people. Let's submit CFPs or call for papers to conferences. Let's just do social / ancillary work. Even using products, reporting bugs, sending feedback, this kind of thing. But if I have another 90-minute cycle, then I'll do it. And this serves me exceptionally well, because one of the problems that I have is, and I think many of you, if you can relate, let me know in the comments, is excitatory runaway. You know what I mean? Like, you start on a problem and you get into it and you love it, and you're like, the whole world disappears, and before you know it, it's nighttime. And you've lost your day. And you would say, I've gladly given my day to this challenge because I love this puzzle, but who has paid the cost? There may be a partner you've neglected. You've definitely not gone and exercised. You haven't eaten. Like there is a cost, right? And what helps me balance this cost is the 90-minute window. And so that's kind of my protocol. Also, I'll say this is when I'm working remote. When you work in an office, this kind of stuff just is naturally regulated. I remember when I used to work in an office, I would only do an hour and a half of offensive work a day. And then, somebody's like, hey, it's my birthday. I brought cake. Let's go to lunch. Let's get a coffee. Let's have a meeting. Like, you're lucky if you can do 90 minutes of uninterrupted offensive work in an office, right? And so it's kind of the same with remote. So this helps me have lines in the sand and do balance exceptionally well. That being said, I will say I struggle with taking vacation. I don't really take vacations very much. And if I do, it's like adventure vacations. But let's talk a little bit, since we're talking about work-life balance, let's look at the science of this through psychological detachment, because that's really what it is. It's like severance. You're like, okay, that's fun stuff, and that's work stuff. How do we do that? There's a study by Sonnentag and Fritz from 2007, in the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology. And in it, they talk about the development and validation of the Recovery Experience Questionnaire. There's multiple studies, and there's hundreds of workers across different professions. And what it is, they found in this study is 4 recovery experiences. Number 1, was psychological detachment, is where you mentally disengage from work. Number two was relaxation. So it's like very low effort, positive experiences. Like you're just feeling calm, you're watching boats go by, you're in the sauna. Number three was mastery, was learning experiences and challenges in non-work domains. So you leave work and then you go do tennis and you want to be the best tennis player in the world. That's number three. And number four is agency or control, deciding what, when, and how to do things during non-work time. So these four markers, again, psychological detachment, relaxation, mastery, and control or agency. These four experiences led to the best recovery and work-life balance among all the people studied. Also, mastery experiences were uniquely important. People who pursued some mastery during off work time, they had more energy and they were like way more enthusiastic the next morning. For most people, detachment was the hardest one. And I've heard this also anecdotally. Like a lot of my friends are like, how do I detach from work? And so maybe there's a way to say the best way to detach from work is to pursue mastery of some intense hobby, right? Um, when you pursue mastery, like learning how to play the guitar or something like this, you engage similar sort of neural circuits, but it's different enough that it doesn't drain you, and that's kind of the protocol. So that's also in my own life. Like I think the reason I'm able to have healthy balance is because I do my 90 minutes and then I go for a run or I go lift weights. Like I want mastery in the physical health domain because I wasn't really given good physical health most of my life. As I've mentioned my disease a few times. And so I only learned how to ride a bicycle like fairly recently. And believe me, that was a mastery pursuit. And by no means am I a master of riding a bicycle now. But you know, I I'm on the way and it has definitely helped me detach. So those experiences can help you. That is proven science. Links in the show notes. All right. We've got a couple more topics and then we'll land the plane. Sickness. We haven't really talked about sickness, but we all get sick. And probably the worst thing is you put all these things into practice. You're sleeping well, you're eating well, you're exercising well, you have great social connections, and you've got your work-life balance dialed in. Um, then next thing that happens is you get sick. You get sick, and as a consequence of your sickness, you have a fever. It's hard to sleep. You don't sleep well, so now you're eating a bunch of nonsense. You're not exercising, of course, because you're sick. Everything falls apart when you're sick. How do we get sick well in a way that maintains consistency and allows us not to lose the progress we've made? This is actually very timely because just before recording this, I was super sick. I had a bacterial infection in my throat and I felt like everything was falling apart. And so I need to like speak to myself here, you know. So how do we get sick well? Um, there's data first. I think we'll start with this. I wear an Aura ring, and you may wear a Whoop strap or an Apple Watch or something like this. It's worth paying attention to data because before you get sick, you'll notice a couple of things. You'll notice your temperature is slightly elevated. You'll notice your resting heart rate is slightly higher than usual because your body's working to fight off some infection. And you'll notice your heart rate variability is lower. We have a lot to talk about with heart rate variability, but we'll park that for a little while. But these three measures will signal to you that something is wrong. And these apps will actually tell you it looks like you're starting to get sick. That's when you have the best opportunity to fight it. Remember, we just talked about with work-life balance that you're a way better driver in the morning than in the evening. It's the same thing. You're as an immune system, you're way more effective as soon as you wake up or early into the sickness than later. So you want to tackle it early first thing. So as soon as you start to feel some malaise and you have objective measures telling you, hey, this is not right, immediately you're going to want to take rest. That's it. Like everything stops, every work, social, everything stops. And this is time for me. This is time for me to do what I want, when I want. I'm going to lay in bed, I'm going to relax. It is okay. I'm going to initialize recovery protocols and just live in them. and stay in them and going to be fine. Because if I do not, it will get worse. And so what you've got to do is mentally just accept yourself taking a break, and that's fine. Yes, you will break your consistency, but it's temporary. Your body probably needs the rest anyway. So when we get sick, we cannot let it compromise sleep, but we can let it compromise exercise, because we do exercise to be strong. When you're sick, if you do exercise, it makes you weaker. It's counterproductive. So we'll drop the exercise. In terms of nutrition, we maybe won't eat a bunch of unhealthy stuff, but we'll drop thinking about it too much. Here's what happens when you're sick. Your body goes into work mode, fighting a war. Everything you do towards exercise or stress takes resources away from that war. If you think about it like that, you're literally taking guns out of your white blood cells' hands and saying, hey, invader, go nuts, right? And so what you want to do is you want to support your homeland, your body in this war. And how you do that is with rest and food. And you do not opt for more stress this way. And if you do that, you're going to be fine. Of course, there's medication. You'll want to talk to a doctor. Zinc is a great supplement to help with immune system, vitamin D as well, if you live in solar compromised areas. But I think with getting sick, it's more a mind game than a physical one, right? You've just got to be okay with rest. You've got to be okay with, it's fine. I'm just going to chill. It's hard. If you're the kind of person who listens to this podcast and you spend all this time learning all this stuff and putting it into practice, and then you're proud of yourself, you're like, wow, I have a routine, I'm consistent, I'm this, I'm that, and then you get sick, it can be very hard to break it. You have to break it and know that it'll be fine, because you're that kind of person. Okay. What I do when I get sick, as soon as I know I'm sick, everything stops and I'm in bed the whole day. I eat what I feel like, and I just like watch something the whole day. I go to this. I actually don't go to the sauna until I feel like the symptoms are getting slightly better. I just literally bed rest, nothing else. It's rare that I stay sick very often. In fact, the only times where my sicknesses tend to blossom and last longer than I want is if I have hard plans that I've committed to where I cannot rest. For example, going to Taiwan. Or travel. Usually I tend to get sick, and then I have flights that have been booked for months, and I have to go. Of course, I don't have to go. But if I sort of overrule my body and do the work anyway because it's booked and the show must go on, then the tax collector comes later, and it's even worse. And so that's my story, but that I hope helps you. Final thing we need to talk about is travel, since we're already on the subject, and jet lag. Many of you have asked, Tejas, how in the world do you go to Kuala Lumpur? How do you go to Australia? How do you go to Taiwan and come back to Germany and you're just fine? Especially people who know me. How can I land one day before a conference and then speak at the conference and perform without any sign that I'm jet lagged? This is actually just built on all the things we've talked about. And this is why it's last in the episode. We started this talking about sleep. Jet lag is a disruption to the natural circadian cycle. We know now what regulates the natural circadian cycle. That is light, and that is movement and temperature, right? And so what I'll do is sometime before my travel, say I'm going from here to Taiwan, from Germany to Taiwan. Taiwan is 7 hours ahead of Germany. So what I'll do is a day, maybe a couple of days before, I'll already start doing a few things according to Taiwan time. For example, it's very easy to eat according to Taiwan time. I just have breakfast at like 7 a.m. in Taiwan, which is midnight here. And I'll adjust maybe food according to Taiwan time, then exercise according to Taiwan time. I'll go for my run around morning Taiwan time. And of course, I'll adjust sleep as well, and but slowly in stages, and not too rigorously, but just enough to tell my body, hey, just so you know, a disruption is coming, I cannot allow those adjustments to interfere with day-to-day life here. But in as much as I'm able, I'll already start to kind of mess things up a little bit on purpose. The biggest hack is coffee and caffeine. I go ham, and I'll do like a Red Bull, like a 355 ml, like a 12 ounce. I'll do a large Red Bull around the morning of Taiwan, and then just like stay awake and sleep when I sleep, which is usually I'm already like I warm up the cache, so to speak, for jet lag. But then also it's like a 20-hour journey from here to Taiwan, 16-hour flight one way, and then some layovers. You can easily go 20 hours. In that time, um, that's when we go brute force. As soon as I leave my home to go to the airport, it's brute forcing the adjustment. What does that mean? That means I absolutely refuse to sleep in transit unless it's time to sleep at the destination. Absolutely. No sleep will be had. And I will use every trick in the book. I will use caffeine. We talked about caffeine. I will use light, melanopsin. I'll put light in my face. I will eat food so that the food keeps me awake, stresses my digestive system so I don't fall asleep. I will I will use literally every trick in the book to stay awake such that I only sleep at the nighttime in the destination. And this is especially hard on airplanes because airplanes, they dim the cabin lights at like the worst time, like as in not the destination's nighttime. They also come serve you food while you're trying to sleep, you know? And you've got to fight all of that and be like, look, it's not time to sleep. And so I'm going to stay awake, even though the cabin lights are dark, which that's tough, but it's worth it. Similarly, if it is time to sleep and the cabin lights are on and they're like tapping you to serve you food, you've got to put the sleeping mask on and maybe even take melatonin and just be like, look, nobody talk to me. I'm simulating darkness. So that's what works for me, and it works exceptionally well. I just came back from Taiwan and I'm like totally not jet lagged at all. Never haven't been at all actually. And so simulating your destination's clock at your source and in transit brute forcing it is the move here, and it has helped tremendously. Okay. We have covered a ton of content. It would be remiss of me if I didn't touch on the final thing and then we wrap up, and that is heart rate variability. I've mentioned HRV a few times, I would be remiss if I didn't say HRV is like the most significant, most important indicator of how stressed or recovered you are. What does that mean? This is to do with everything we discussed, whether it's sleep, exercise, work-life balance, etc. HRV is the number that will tell you your state. HRV is defined as the variability of your heartbeat. So say your heart rate is 60 beats per minute, 60 BPM. That's 1 beat per second, right? Your heartbeat is not regular. So if it's, for example, 1 beat per second, it's not going to be like at the top of every second on the second. It will be a few milliseconds less or a few milliseconds more. It's not a perfectly kept time. Okay, heart rate variability is how relaxed or how strict your heart beats at 60 BPM every second on the second. And so think of it this way. Think of a musical conductor, right? A guy who's like keeping the tempo with his big stick. Your body your nervous system is that conductor. And if your HRV is low, meaning your heart rate variability is very low, it means you're very stressed because this conductor is like stressed. He's like, hey, everything has to be like on the right time. You have to be on the second every day. Like, he's like a drill sergeant, very stressed person. If your HRV is high, and you're not like on the top of every second, but you're just some wiggle room, you're super relaxed. Your conductor is like, he maybe smoked a little something. He's just like chilling. Then your HRV is high. Your heartbeat is variable. High HRV is you're more relaxed. Low HRV is you're more stressed. And HRV is this amazing number that can tell you if overnight your HRV was low, it means you didn't really sleep very well. Something was stressing your body during sleep. If you exercise and you just finished exercise and you measure your HRV, you will see that your HRV is actually very, very low because, of course, exercise is stress. But if you don't exercise one day and your HRV is the same, it means you're still stressed. You didn't recover enough for your next exercise bout. If you eat food and measure HRV, it's going to be low because food causes your nervous system to work. In fact, if you eat a meal before bed and go to bed, your overnight HRV will be low. Anyway, why am I telling you this? Because stress management is so huge. We talk about work-life balance and burnout. We talk about jet lag. We talk about illness recovery. If you're stressed at work, if you're sick, or if you're jet lagged, In all three of these, your HRV is just going to be low, and that's how you know you're approaching burnout. When your HRV is low, take a break, because either you will burn out, or you will get sick, or you won't sleep, and things will go bad. So you want to pay attention to your HRV. Low HRV, time to take it easy. High HRV, time to grind. How do you measure HRV? The Apple Watch is the worst device. Do not trust the Apple. Now, you can trust the Apple Watch's trend of HRV over time. The trend is valuable, but the individual measurements are not accurate at all. The best measurement device for HRV in the world is the Oura Ring, without any competition. It's just tremendous. That's why I wear one. And again, I have no relationship to Oura. It's just, that's what it is. Second best is the Whoop strap. Very accurate. And then others. I don't know. There's a great YouTube channel called The Quantified Scientist. If you want to know more about that, I'll put a link in the show notes. But HRV is the great bookend. And it's intentionally here because we started talking about sleep and how it's the foundation. HRV is the clearest representation of that foundation. It's the clearest signal of, are you actually stressed or not? And do you need to prioritize rest and recovery, or do you need to prioritize stress, hard work, and challenge? That's kind of your guiding. So on the one hand, we started the discussion with sleep, and at the end, we end it with, how do you monitor your overall state and then adjust? If you need to bias toward recovery, deep breathing, sauna, rest is your way. With that, let's leave it here. Listen, if you've lasted this long, it means so much to me. It is really a pleasure, because I care about you. The reason I do, look, it's almost 2 hours before it's 8:36 p.m. right? And it's, why am I doing this after hours? I have a family. I have friends. I just told you all my social friends that I love. Why am I doing this? Because you're one of them, right? I'm doing this because I care about you, and if you listen to it, and if you put it into practice, and if in this year you reach a goal that you're striving for, either better social connection, or your diet is better, you lose body fat, you gain, if your sleep is better, if any positive outcome comes from this, that would be the biggest win for me. That's why I'm doing this. And so if you've lasted this long, genuinely, thank you. Thank you for being a part of this podcast. Thank you for becoming more of an engineer of your own life, solving your own problems systematically, and maybe even being able to help others. Thank you. If you have any comments at all, and if you happen to be watching on YouTube, drop a comment there. I read them. I welcome them. I want to engage with you. If you're not following on Apple or Spotify, please do. And also YouTube if you want to subscribe. And on any of these platforms, if you want to leave a review, anything up to 5 stars, that would be a real help. And if you want to, man, I would love it if any of this spoke to you, if you'd share it on social media so that more people hear about it, right? Because the intent here is not for my own glory or fame. I don't even want that, but it's more, I want people to have control over their lives and be able to solve their problems and feel empowered. It's such a great feeling. And so if you want to share that on social media, I would encourage you. For now, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. And thank you for just everything you've brought to the table. And we'll see you in the next one.